We all know the Death Star's superlaser has the power to destroy an entire planet in a single blast. But how did it actually work? I'll be covering the answer in this video for both the canon and legends. We don't know a whole lot about the canon right now. I expect we're going to learn more in Rogue One, so maybe I should have waited to make this video, but then again, most people are searching for stuff about the Death Star now, so what are you going to do? The Superlaser itself was inspired by ancient Sith weapons like the one seen in the Rebels episode Twilight of the Apprentice. Those weapons were powered by massive kyber crystals, the same crystals that were used in lightsabers. According to Pablo Hidalgo on an episode of Rebels Recon, the Empire devised a way to use 8 of those giant crystals to be placed in a ring. Those would generate a beam that would combine thanks to a focusing lens in the center of the dish to generate one single, highly focused beam that could blow up an entire planet. However, we see attempts to gather those crystals were thwarted twice between the Clone Wars and Rebels. Star Wars Complete Locations tells us that the Empire had to adapt to allow for larger quantities of smaller crystals to take the place of one giant crystal. So it's possible the Superlaser is powered by a combination of large and small crystals depending on what the Empire was able to get their hands on. That's about everything we can read about the Superlaser in the current canon material, but I have some questions and speculations of my own that I'd like to go over. When the Death Star fires, we see this tunnel and a beam, and it kind of makes it seem like that's the beam. But based on how the first Death Star fires, that doesn't quite make sense. So I imagine that this tunnel is actually just one of 8 tunnels that are fired and then combine into one. That seems to be how Legends presented its operation, and I'll cover that in a minute, but I just want to be clear on what we currently know for sure and what we don't. The second Death Star actually fires a little bit differently. It still has the 8 individual lasers, but there are 7 in a ring, and then one comes out of the middle. Maybe this new design accounts for the much faster firing rate, reducing the recharge time from 24 hours to only 3 minutes. So how does the Superlaser differ in Legends? Well, it still harnessed the power of crystals, just not kyber crystals. Instead, it used a Mygeeton energy crystal, or Mygeeton, however you prefer to say it. The beam was described as being made of exotic matter amplified by gigantic focusing magnetic lenses and coils. It was powered by a hypermatter reactor core, which is still true in canon. A reason for the central beam in place of another on the ring is provided for us in Legends, and that is that it provided greater accuracy. It was able to fire at smaller, faster moving targets such as capital ships rather than just planetary bodies. Revisiting what I was talking about with multiple beam tunnels, in Legends there were actually 64 beam shafts that combined into 8 beams before combining into one. So I guess there were 128 of these poor guys just stuck on that tiny little platform next to a beam that probably gave them instantaneous space cancer. Probably the biggest difference between canon and Legends is that the Superlaser was used in more weapons than just the Death Stars. There was an experimental Star Destroyer called the Conqueror that had a Superlaser built in. The Empire also attempted to install a smaller version of it onto a weapon called the Tarkin, but it was sabotaged by the Rebels before it could ever be fired. There was a less powerful Superlaser installed on the Death Star prototype, and finally, although this wasn't the Empire's doing, Durga the Hutt created a super weapon that was basically just a Superlaser in a shell called the Darksaber. I've seen the difference between Legends and canon described before as science fiction versus fantasy. Legends seems to be generally more science-driven in a way, even if it's all fake science. Things are more technically explained. Canon so far is more fantasy, which means it's less focused on providing the intricate workings of a technology. That became very evident to me in researching this video. Legends has so much more intricate detail than canon, but when you boil it down to the core concept, they're pretty similar. 8 beams focusing through crystals combining into one big beam. Personally, I like the use of kyber crystals in the Superlaser. It ties the universe together nicely, but it's also like twisting something meant for good into a weapon of pure destruction. That's it for today. If you want to learn more about the Death Stars, I've been covering a lot of information on them in preparation for Rogue One, so you can check out some of those here. If you haven't already, please make sure you like and share this video, subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and consider checking out my Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you. So, how does the Superlaser differ in Legends? Well, it still harnessed the power of crystals, just not kyber Whoa.